Michael Moore is still with us. I'm joined right now by two-time Emmy Award-winning comedian who's currently on her 50-city tour and who's also been out there performing for the U.S. troops serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, Kathy Griffin. By the way, thank you on behalf of our country. I know these guys love these USO tours. I mean, they think they're really cool and everything, but when someone like you shows up, they go, wow, they care back there. Thank you.
Well,
what you make of the show tonight, the show that went on in the Congress tonight? What you make of it?
Well, it was actually shorter than I thought. I actually thought, oh, no, this fool is going to go on for 4 or 5 hours. I'm going to have to give him the light. But, you know, Chris, what an idiot. I mean, we got to watch this idiot for, you know, an hour and 9 minutes. He just says one hateful thing after the other. He's so embarrassing. Just from the beginning, you know, Melania comes in with the sequin jacket, and all the white guys are like, hey, she's hot. Maybe if I'm like him, I could get her. The whole sham from the beginning. But, you know, as I was watching the so-called speech, I can't help but picture Stephen Miller. Like, he is a comedian's dream. That guy with the dead eyes, writing that stuff. You know, I watched the video of him at Samo High, Santa Monica High. He was saying his premise was that the students shouldn't have to put up with lazy janitors anymore, and the janitors should be quicker at picking up their garbage at lunch in Santa Monica. So I love to think of like this crazy scene behind him.
You're
in high school, there's a tape of it.
That was his high school speech.
Yeah, he wrote it. There's a tape of it. He's reciting it very passionately. But, you know,
I've never heard of a Dickensian high school speech before. They're always sort of uplifting and liberal. But this guy wants to trash the working folk.
Yes, and this speech was not uplifting in any way.
Now they're out rooting for these guys.
Okay, he's not for anything but himself, first of all. But, you know, one thing I'm really glad you mentioned that I went and performed in Iraq and Afghanistan, because one thing I personally have an issue with is, my goodness, anyone who's running for president or president should at least go to these areas and see what war really is. And let me tell you, you know, being in those war zones, as you know very well, Chris, and Michael, obviously you know as well, it's a very different situation than what you think it will be. So, you know, my time in those areas, and including going to Walter Reed back here and stuff, it does change your mind once you're in that actual environment. And I'm certainly no expert on the military, but I'm so glad that I had even that bird's eye look into their life and their lifestyle and their culture and during war. So it's astounding to me to hear him espouse these thoughts and ideas, and it really does seem like he doesn't put any thought into the real people that have to execute them and suffer the consequences.
What did you make about that dinner he had that night before he committed our troops to Yemen, to that mission over there, where he's sitting around with Jared, his son-in-law, and his chief political strategist, Bannon, and over drinks or whatever, he decides to commit the troops. And then the other day, or actually today, he comes out and says, oh, that wasn't my decision. I inherited that mission. The generals, they lost him. I didn't lose that guy. I didn't lose Ryan Owen. Why, how can you just not even remember that we once had presidents like Kennedy and Harry Truman that said, buck stops here. Okay, blame me. Kennedy said after the bad pigs, I was the officer in charge. I'm the one you got to blame. And he took it. I mean, he did it. By the way, Kennedy did deserve to take it. It was his mistake. But he didn't run from it.
No, and there's such a thing as responsibility, and Trump has no concept of that. And, you know, you've seen those ceremonies when a soldier, you know, dies on the battlefield, and I keep thinking about that image. Now I actually think it was a photo op of Trump and Ivanka going to Dover to meet the parents who would not meet with him. And I thought he should have taken away from that moment, hey, maybe this is me crossing a boundary, or maybe there's something uncomfortable here. I thought that that was an opportunity that he missed, where he could have, for once, you know, been an adult and done a respectable thing. And I thought that moment of, you know, pointing out the widow, and I felt it was exploiting her grief a little bit. And as you know, those ceremonies are very, very serious. And I feel like this is a president who doesn't take anything seriously. So, you know, as someone who travels the country, I always joke that Fox News has nothing on me, because I really do go to the real America. I did 80 cities last year. I'm doing 50 this year. And what I love about it, and I know, Chris, I know that you and I share this, I love going to the small towns. When I'm playing Ohio, I stop at Grandpa's Cheese Barn in between shows, you know, and you go everywhere. So this idea of the real America is something he's really playing into. And also, everywhere I go, I travel, I'll make a joke and I'll say, well, I'm from Illinois, I live in Los Angeles now, and we actually would like to keep the Mexicans. I would like to stand on the wall and throw Mexicans into the United States if I could.
By the way, those AAA towns love when you guys come, because they're not like the big cities like Chicago and LA and San Francisco and New York, but you go to cities that are a little smaller,
Yeah.
And when someone like you shows up, it's a treat, and people say, she gives a damn. She's out here working with us. She's with us. And
I love it. There's nothing better. And it's amazing to me that so many of those folks support Trump so passionately, because I want to kind of explain to them, and they're going to learn the hard way, whatever you called the ACA, it's still the ACA, and so you're going to lose that health insurance. I thought the audacity of him, and I hate to even use an Obama word, but the audacity of him to make all these promises to these folks after the town halls just happened, and that he didn't take the town hall seriously, or he thought George Soros was paying me to go to the Women's March, $1,500 a week.
But how about this? How about this, Kathy? We've had presidents talking about health care since Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt. Richard Nixon was going to have an employer mandate. Sure. And finally we get a guy that gets it into action. And how can you blame him for being the first guy to get something done? And I mean, I don't understand. It's like there's some better plan that the Republicans had to put in that. They had a better health care plan for working people. They had nothing. They voted against Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. They voted against every one of these programs. And then they say, well, this isn't quite what we were looking for. There's a couple flaws in this. And nobody stepped back and said, nada. They had nothing to offer as an alternative, and never have.
No, and also the Affordable Care Act was the Republican plan. It started out as hoping for single payer. Exactly. And it was the compromise from not being able to get single payer. And for all the busters out there, who turned into Trumpers or whatever, Bernie wanted single payer and still does more than anybody. So when Obama tried to get single payer and then it turned into ACA, that is the Republican compromise. And just so you know, I'm of the party. I'm a big resistor, and I don't believe in compromise with this president. I also think he's crazy. I think he's mentally ill. He's also an idiot. I'm going to get on that because somebody had one of the people. Lawrence had a professor on the other night, psychiatrist. Make your point. Make your point. Why do you think he's nutty? Well, first of all, I know him, and I know you do as well. So don't act like he doesn't say crazy stuff. Like, he turned to me one time at one of these Larry King birthday parties, they have at the Hilton on 6th. And he turns to me, and we're next to each other on the dais, and I was between him and Gilbert Gottfried. I've never been more in love with Gilbert in my life. And Trump turns to me, he goes, "So you're a female comedian?" Like, he's that guy, Chris. You're a female comedian. I go, yeah, next thing you know, we're going to want to vote. Like, he's that guy that would come up to me and go, "You're a female comedian?" And so, and then he asked me, he goes, "How much do you make?" And I go, "How much do you make?" And he goes, $1 billion. And I go, "Me too." Gilbert, what are you having? So one time, when I did the interview with him, Kathy, and he talked about punishing women for abortion, everybody. Oh my gosh, Chris, what we were talking about during the break? I don't know why it came up, but this shows how his brain is focused. I said, let's talk about Zoolander. I wasn't thinking about his wife being a model or beautiful or anything like that. I was just thinking Zoolander was a funny movie. And I said, well, how come Zoolander 2 didn't make it? He was explaining that to me. He was explaining that it was the zeitgeist at a certain moment in time. Really good-looking, stupid people was really funny. And then the cosmos shifted, and all of a sudden, that wasn't funny anymore. This is where he's at. So that's not crazy. It's some kind of what? What do we call that? I think that's where his mind is. Marketing. All right. Tonight was marketing. Chris, don't act like he's a genius. Like, he's no academic genius either. Yes, it's marketing 101. Yeah. Also, I was wondering, like, the number of minutes of applause for a guy who was killed in a war is like a way you metric the thing. That's, I know. And when he said the comment about now he broke the record, it's like, I don't think that's why he joined the armed forces. And I loved her. You know what? I said this tonight, Kathy. The most and only truly honest emotion tonight. Laughter. Was Karen Owens looking up to heaven, trying to talk to her husband. That was and by the way, I was going to say laughter because laughter's involuntary, but you're right. Her looking up here, and by the way, that was what the applause was for, clearly. It wasn't that you're applauding his policies. I have a lot of questions about that Yemeni raid, like anybody else. From what I've read in the Times and WAPO, it does sound like it's something that the whole Department of Defense had in mind for a long time. And now, I mean, the way we go from Department of Defense, and now they're trying to rob the State Department, and at the same time, DOJ. Let's get rid of diplomacy. Let's make more enemies. He wants to put voice under Homeland Security. Can you imagine Jay Johnson saying, "Oh, we're going to open this club. It's called Voice, and it's where citizens turn on each other like the Nazis." Look, let's cut foreign aid. It's 1% of the budget. Right. That's going to save us. That's going to pay for doubling the military and more weapons. That is the biggest lie. You cannot. You cannot starve the foreign aid budget. It's too small to starve. And to say you're going to use it for $54 billion in more defense spending is not true. Yeah,
It
and
just
also,
isn't true.
I just want to say, you know, participating in the Women's March, which so many of us did, including my boyfriend and many men and women alike, the idea that he thinks that we were paid, or did you see him the other day? He's like a third grader. He goes, yeah, they're doing this thing. They call it obstruct and resist. Like he thinks it's this thing we made up this week.
Did you notice the Republicans spent how many on its security?
Yeah.
So his answer is to cut the State Department.
Well,
does anybody put this stuff together and say, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense?
Look, Chris, I feel like this whole crowd, they are truly going to go down. The good news is, as I say to my younger friends, don't forget, Agnew resigned before Nixon.
Yes.
So there can be a situation where more than one person goes down. This administration and cabinet, they're like the final scene in an episode of Intervention. But this time the intervention, it says, okay, intervention says, Donald, you're not just going to rehab. We're going to send everybody. Bannon, you got to go. Kellyanne, you're next. Stephen Miller, all the Millers. I gotta go.
You're obviously a comedian because you can remember Spiro Agnew. A material like this never. Here's a guy that went around the country speaking morality, how we have to have better morality. He's taking bags, brown bags of cash as the vice president of the United States in the old executive office building. They were delivering big bags with cash in it from the contractors in Maryland for a little late payment for some of his work as governor down there. And it never occurred to him, I'm a thief.
Yeah. Well, Chris, please tell me you're never going to let go of this Russian ties story. I really think that's the one. I think it's bipartisan. I think there's so much there. There's so people that could be implicated. There's so many things that are happening that look to the average citizen like, oh, this could be a result of whatever conversations were happening.
Remember John Arbuckle?
I don't think it's just Flynn.
Was he the guy that saw John Arbuckle sold coffee, or was it coffee, or was it popcorn? He said, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
Yeah. A fair exchange is no robbery. Anyway, Kathy Griffin, you are a treat. You are a Griffin.
I adore you.
You are a
and
Mick.
You're doing
I know
such
you're
great
a good
work.
Mick, and I like you for it.
I try
and
to be
your
a good
mouth
Mick.
was as pure as an angel tonight, by the way.
Well, because you and Nicole Wallace and Brian were scaring me about the 7-second delay. I mean, you know, when you come see me live, I make no promises.
You are wonderful. You can do it flat or round. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're going to thank you, Kathy Griffin. It was a great. She's one of my lancemen. Thank you so much. An Irish girl. Thank you so much. Back now to filmmaker Mike.